Between July 31st and August 2nd, 2026, my aunt came over to stay with us for 3 days. And we had devised a system of trips that would make this weekend as fun as possible. On the Friday, my aunt would have a day to herself. On Saturday, my brother would have one, and on Sunday, I would have one. We would all go out to locations we wanted to go to, and we would just generally have a great time enjoying each other's interests. And obviously, on my day, which was Sunday, I was going to pick a train-related thing. And the first thing I wanted to do was Hoosier Valley Railroad Museum's steam excursion that they were doing that day. Until their locomotive, Bach Lumber Company 1, decided to kick the bucket and die. So they couldn't do steam excursions. So then I thought, okay, I'll go to the Elkhart Museum, aka the National New York Century Museum, to check out NYC 3001, the Mohawk, before they move it, and maybe get some info on how the move is going to go. But as it turns out, they're closed on Sundays. So I went through a lot of plans, Plan A's, Plan B, all the way to Plan G, and Plan G was to go to Ogden Dunes. Now you see, South Shore had recently unveiled a new heritage unit, and I really, really wanted to see it. And Ogden Dunes was the best place to see South Shore because the NS Chicago line also runs right by it. Since all the railroad museum-related things I wanted to do on this day were not possible, and going to see the South Shore is something that I don't get to do very often, I decided to go to Ogden Dunes, which was a really good idea. Upon checking the South Shore schedule, we realized that around 2 p.m., the amount of commuter trains would start to increase for the evening, and since it was Lollapalooza, we figured that a couple extra trains would be running on top of the normal schedule, which was wrong. Either way, we made good time towards the Ogden Dunes station, and eventually we started paralleling the South Shore, where we saw absolutely zero commuter trains, which was not promising. Along the way, we briefly stopped at the Dune Park South Shore station to take a look at the electronic signs that display when the next train's going to be there to see if there were any extras running. There weren't, so I grabbed some photos of the station and we continued on our way to Ogden Dunes. Along the way, we passed through Burns Harbor, and in NS's Burns Harbor yard, we saw 2 GEs parked behind some coal hoppers, and eventually we started passing by another long cut of stopped coal hoppers as we continued out of Burns Harbor. These are probably just waiting to be switched in for steel mill use, or empty waiting to get sorted out. As we got closer to Ogden Dunes, we saw this very slow-moving local train, which we began overtaking as we got closer to the station. But just as the head end was coming into view, CSX M326 appeared with a YN2 leader. 2 minutes later, we were pulling into the parking lot of the Ogden Dunes South Shore station. But I didn't have any time to breathe because as soon as we got in, I noticed the headlights of that local we had overtaken, which turned out to be NSB 26, and I had to rush to the tracks to get a video of it. As the local was passing, I realized that I had accidentally walked into a Railfan meetup, because down at the other end of the parking lot, there was about a dozen Railfans. I walked over and asked what was going on, and they explained that one of them was having his birthday party here, and to celebrate, he was railfanning, and lots of other foamers had come out to celebrate with him. And among this group was the absolute legend Cedar Lake's Railfanner, who somehow manages to show up every time I go out to a more exotic railfan location. He was there for the Centennial excursion, he was there when I was at Pine Junction, and here he was at Ogden Dunes. We chatted for a while, but I soon had to turn my attention away from the end of Chicago line where they were all sitting, and towards the South Shore Electric, because a train was scheduled to pull in at 2:14, and by now it was like 2:10. I made my way over to the platform, and very soon a South Shore train made of the iconic single-level multiple units rolled in. Sadly, at the same time the South Shore train pulled in, NS-26X also went through, and so I missed it. I would have rather gotten the South Shore train though, considering I can see NS practically any day, and South Shore is a somewhat rarer thing for me. With that train gone, there would be nothing else on the South Shore for 2 hours. And so I turned my attention back to the NS Chicago line, and I made my way back to the horde of foamers before NS-27G showed up with a UP Ace. Shortly after, I heard the gates on the South Shore Electric go down. These gates have a very different sound from the NS ones, and me not knowing that both gates went down simultaneously despite what line the train was on, I thought that that meant a South Shore freight or an extra passenger train had to be running on that line, which was wrong. The train was actually the Amtrak Blue Water on the NS Chicago line, and I missed getting a good shot of it, which I'm very salty about because it had a P42 liter, which is very rare for this train. Usually SC44s are the only power. After that failure, I made my way back to the NS Chicago line just in time for NS 266 to appear with an H1-9 trailing. After that, I made my way back towards the Foamer gang, and they informed me that a train we were all anticipating was fast approaching. NS-264 with NS-4004, one of the DC to AC Blue Main Shadow Bonnets, trailing second. Despite the main prize of the day having passed, the parade of eastbounds did not stop as the Amtrak Wolverine followed right behind, also heading east, with a boring SC44. which was then shortly followed by an abnormally long NSB-09 with the same engines it's had practically all summer. We thought the eastbound streak would be broken when we saw the head end of NS33G coming around the curve. However, it was going very slow and eventually stopped right before it reached us and then pushed back into Burns Harbor Yard, since it was working it on this day. Normally 33G doesn't work any yards, so when this happened we were all confused, but we were hoping that eventually it would fully pull out so we could see the awesome H2-9 liter and GP60 in tow that this train had for power. Either way, its stopping here meant the eastbound streak could continue, as CPKC 730 was the next proper train, which flew by with an all-CP consist, the second unit being a very weird AC-44. Finally, the eastbound streak was broken by NS39E, which had yet more foreign power. This train is a Norfolk Southern Union Pacific transfer, but recently it seems like it's had only Norfolk Southern power, so it was kinda cool to see it with UP power. However, the real prize of this train was the second engine, because it was an SD70M. You already know how much I love SD70Ms, and UP is like the only railroad that has them, and of course they're not going to stick around long enough for me to see them once UP buys out Norfolk Southern, so I was very glad to see it. Not to mention, it was UP 4004, which totally doesn't share its number with a certain locomotive that's on display in Cheyenne, Wyoming. Shortly after 39E passed, literally every other foamer except me left because CSX M353 had just gone through Pine Junction with a YN2 liter and 3 Metra SD70 Max. I wanted to catch it, but I decided to stay in Ogden Dunes since I knew that 2 South Shore trains would soon be converging on the station. And not very long after I made that decision, the first and only westbound South Shore train I saw the entire day rolled in and picked up lots of passengers headed to Lollapalooza, presumably. After that, the next South Shore was only about 20 minutes out, so I thought I could just stay at the platform and everything would be fine. But nope, there was an NS Chicago line jump scare. I'm not going to complain too much, however, because it was NS28X with a somewhat rare H3-9 trailing. But before that train could even fully clear, I had to rush back to the platform as another South Shore, once again made up of double-decker multiple units, rolled in. After that, I was planning to leave. However, when I made it back to the car parked over by the Norfolk Southern tracks, I noticed a green signal, and so I decided to wait, and it wasn't long before 33G appeared, having sadly dropped off the GP60 in Burns Harbor. And as soon as the head end passed, we got out of there. In retrospect, I kinda wish I had abandoned Ogden Dunes and gone down to the Garrett sub to see those Metromax, but overall I'm very happy with what I got, and I had a great time talking with the other foamers who were out on this day. And I hope you enjoyed this video just as much as I did filming it. I hope you enjoyed. Make sure to catch those units while you can, especially the South Shore ones that are impersonating Metra, and I will see you in the next video.